Rich countries are holding back on the realization of sustainable development goals by not committing 0.7% of their gross national income to overseas aid. UNCTAD Secretary-General Mukhisa Kituyi says that if wealthy nations had consistently met the target agreed upon in 2002, developing countries would have been $2 trillion better off. The UN Conference on Trade and Development, or UNCTAD in short, is currently underway in development. This year's Development and Globalization report has already been released to delegates. The report generated $2 trillion figure and highlights some of the challenges in measuring progress or achieving the goals as well. Now, CCTV's Ucho Koronko is at the conference. She filed this report.
The second day of the 14th session of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development opened with about 10,000 delegates from both the public and the private sector. And of course, the focus was all about the how-tos when it comes to achieving those sustainable development goals. And like the theme says, moving from decision to action. Now, a lot of the afternoon sessions looked at the opportunities and the challenges that the private and public sector face when it comes to implementing those SDGs. This morning at a World Leaders Summit, they debated, of course, how to align domestic policy and international action. But of course, it was all about dissecting that 17-point plan and those 169 targets that were meant to build on the progress of the Millennium Development Goals. But the highlight of today was the launch of the UN's 2016 Development and Globalization report. And for the first time, they measured the progress on achieving those sustainable development goals. Now, I spoke to the head of its Statistics and Information Unit, Stephen McFeely, and this is what he had to say.
By giving a State of the Nation report, we include the MDG goals, so you can see, well, what was progress made or not. But what it also shows is how much more complex the SDGs are than the MDGs. So the MDGs were quite narrow and focused. They really focused on poverty alleviation. In those last 15 years, two things have happened. One, the climate change issue has become much more immediate. And secondly, within kind of development economics, they've realized that everything is much more interconnected. So there's no point in trying to alleviate poverty if you don't develop economies. But there's no point in developing economies if you leave society in tatters. So, and equally you see that governance and kind of institutional governance is really important. So what the SDGs really do is straddle these and kind of say, look, these are all really important, and policy coherence must be found across all of them.
Now, your report also highlights some of the challenges faced in, of course, measuring and achieving these global goals. What are some of the challenges you expect to see?
In doing this report, what we discovered is that there's a lot of goals that are extremely difficult to measure, either because they're just very, very complicated goals in themselves, or in a lot of cases there isn't yet statistical concepts that match those goals. Secondly, the MDGs relied on what are called official statistics, so statistics from government. In this report, what we've said in the foreword, we think actually to measure the SDGs, we're going to have to rely on a much broader set of data. So data from NGOs, but also data from new data sources like big data.
Now, when you look at the numbers, is your outlook positive in terms of the targets and the progress that can be made with these sustainable and development goals?
We saw from the MDGs is that progress was uneven. It was uneven across goals, and it was uneven regionally. And I expect the exact same thing to happen with the SDGs. Some SDGs will make progress quickly, may even achieve their targets. Other targets will either fail or they'll only be partially achieved. I mean, one of the critical issues really is around climate. If the climate issues aren't addressed, then all of the other issues to some extent become redundant, because we only have one planet. If we don't mind this planet that we have, then developing economies really it's an academic debate.
The conference also saw a launch of a new initiative which is aimed at helping developing countries take advantage of the $22 trillion opportunity in the e-commerce sector. Now, the new initiative is aimed at bringing together international players, donors, and of course domestic businesses under one umbrella and providing them that ease of access to technical assistance and funding. Uche Okoronkwo, CCTV, Nairobi.